Hello and welcome to The Positive Shift, a podcast hosted by Simcoe Addiction and Mental Health, where we focus on shifting perspectives on the journey of mental health and addiction recovery. Our goal is to create a safe and supportive space for those who are struggling and to provide guidance, hope, and encouragement. We understand that the road to recovery and self-improvement can be a challenging one. However, it's not something you have to do alone. Whether you are someone who is dealing with mental health and/or addiction, we believe that every story has value and can help others feel seen and heard. Our goal with this podcast is to bring together experts and real-life experiences to provide practical and meaningful insights into the process of healing. We want you to know that you are not defined by your struggles and that there is always a way to move forward. We are here to listen, to support, and to offer a shoulder to lean on as you take the important steps towards a better, more fulfilling life. So let's get started and take this journey together. Before we begin, the content discussed in this episode could be sensitive to our listeners. If you are currently in crisis, please contact Canada's Suicide Prevention Service at 1-833-456-4566 or dial 911. If you are in need of more information, please head over to our website, simcoerehab.ca, and go to our Resources tab to access downloadable PDFs, contacts, and guides. If you're looking for support and wish to seek treatment, you can email us at info@simcoerehab.ca or call today at 1-833-304-8181.
Welcome back to A Positive Shift. It's so good to be here today. We got a special episode today. We have one of my mentors and just an all-around incredible human being, a professional in the field. I'll let him elaborate a little bit about him on a personal level as well. But I'd love to take this opportunity to welcome you. Hello, Jordan. Welcome to A Positive Shift, buddy.
Hey, thanks, Jay, for having me.
Yeah, no, man, absolutely. I know we're gonna have a little bit of a conversation today about a few things. We'll probably drop a couple questions in your lap, see where the conversation takes us. I do think it's really important to do an episode on basically a few things. I mean, what happens after inpatient treatment? Well, what do the community supports look like? What are the factors that that we see as being integral in recovery from addiction or any mental health challenges that we face, and this sort of stuff. I just kind of get it going. I mean, like, I know that it wasn't too long ago. I actually remember, so I'm the product of a few treatment centers, and I walked into a treatment center one time, and I won't indulge the man's name, but he was a special human being, and he asked me what I was there for. And I remember saying to him, I'm here for alcohol. And he put his arm around me, started walking me back out the door, and he said, "Oh, we don't serve any of that here, you know." And I'm like, I don't know, and that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. He says, "Well, what are you here for?" And I said, "To get help." And it was probably the single hardest line that I can recall in my journey of saying I need help. I was really resistant to that 4-letter word. Like a part of my brain would always say, "Hey, I can do this by myself. I know I can." And I was resistant to new information. And I wasn't too long ago. I had a client here at our center, and I remember asking him. I says, "Let me ask you something. Did you think about drinking or getting high today?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, why do you think that is?" And he gave me, a laundry list of reasons and all this. And I said, "Well, may I help you?" And he said, "Certainly." And I said, "Because we don't serve you alcohol or drugs here." Right. And you have this automatic level of acceptance that you can't drink or drug. So the mind doesn't go to that as the first thought. It might go to, "I think I'm going to leave here and go get high," but it isn't. I wake up and I'm going to get high, or I'm going to have a drink. And so we need to take that level of acceptance into, everyday society and go back to work and have functional and communicative and healthy relationships with people and all this stuff. But I need to have that acceptance. Does that sound familiar to you?
Very familiar. I'm a professional in the field, but I'm also a recovering drug addict. And I remember at the beginning, the concession of letting go of ego and autonomy and being able to say that I'm able to do this on my own. That was always my path, right? Is I couldn't concede to the program, or I couldn't concede to help from somebody or from a treatment center. And my sponsor always used to tell me that I was swimming upriver and all I had to do was float.
That's it.
And it changes things when we ask for help, because we don't have to decide when we're floating down the river which way the river's going to take us. We just lay on our back and just let it happen. And the instinct is to direct the course of action, the direction we're going to go. But I when I was at a treatment center called Sunshine Coast years ago, way out in BC in like Powell River, and they were talking about this like valley, and they're like, you're in the bottom of this valley and you've got other people with you, and they were talking about like we're a platoon, right? We're all walking around and walking around this valley with our rifles and in our gear and our helmets on, and all of a sudden we start taking enemy fire.
Right.
And people are dropping. And he says, what direction do you run? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you mean? What direction's the fire coming from?
Right.
And he's like, you don't know. You just seen people hit the ground. What direction do you run?
Right.
I'm like, I don't know the answer to that. He goes, but we do. He's like, that's the difference, is on our own. When I don't ask for help, I might be running directly towards fire.
Right.
I might be running into the enemy because I can't see what's over that precipice.
Right.
So I have to trust somebody who has been there before, who knows where they're going, in order to get in the right direction. And that's a really difficult thing, especially being an adult. Most people in recovery, when they choose to get in recovery, they're adults. Mm-hmm. And, it is unmanageable. And to be an adult that can't run my own life, that doesn't get to decide when I go to sleep, doesn't get to decide when I eat, right. Doesn't get to decide where I live, all of those things that you have to concede to get help, to go into a treatment program. It's a really difficult thing, but it's, like I said, it's a liberating thing.
And, you mentioned a couple of really important pieces there, right? About, conceding to that, as well as I mentioned, acceptance. What other factors do you think are the most important in recovery?
Work, finding, disbalancing the addiction. So, if I hear a lot of people and they'll say, this is really hard, so I can't do this. Mm-hmm. Or I don't like this, so I can't do this.
That's more accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're not willing to put in the work that is required to counteract the deficit that they have. And the reason for that is because there's no clarity on what they actually have as a disease. Mm-hmm. Addiction is, it meets all the clinical standards of a disease with the American Disease Society. Yeah. It's terminal, it's fatal, it's incurable, and it changes your body at a cellular structure.
Right.
And but people don't see it that way. So what happens is even for people who have drug addiction, is they look at their disease, and as soon as they get a couple days in, mm-hmm. they look better, they feel better, they smell better, mm-hmm. they forget.
Right.
And they stop working. But with anything else, that wouldn't happen. If I had cancer,
right,
and the doctor said, you can come and see me every day, or you can see me once every couple weeks, I'd say every day.
Right.
I wouldn't hesitate.
Of course.
With meetings, people won't do that. With treatment, people won't do that.
Right.
They'll say, oh, yeah, every couple weeks.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. First Monday of every month.
Yeah. If I went to a chemo clinic and I didn't like the way somebody smelt beside me, or the way they talked to me there, or what the pamphlets said, I would still go.
Right.
Because I acknowledge that I'm dying.
Right.
Addicts don't acknowledge that they're dying.
Right. How do we get better if we don't even know we're sick? Right.
Right. So because they don't see the forest for the trees, they have a disease of perception.
Yeah, man.
They stop doing the work. And that is the crux of it. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, I've got 12 years in recovery, and I do just as much or more work on my recovery now than I did on day one.
Right.
And it is tiring, and it is at times I want to quit doing all that work.
Right.
But I realize what my disease is, and I realize how quickly it'll take me out. So without that dedication to doing the work that's required and the self-honesty to acknowledge where I'm at,
right,
I'm not going to make it. Those are like, I think those two things are at the epicenter of what recovery is and has to be in order for people to gain long-term recovery.
Absolutely. The consistency, discipline, the imagination of how bad things can go. We have to, like, on paper though, right, Jordan? On paper, 3, 4, 5 days, 7 days a week, 10 days, 30 days, 6 months. I can write down how bad it was, but I can't thrust myself into that same feeling. I can't grasp that piece, that level of desperation that I had at one point. It's much like when, I had a really close family member lose their vision a couple of years back. And, and I remember trying with compassion and with empathy to really put myself in this person's shoes. And I would close my eyes and try to imagine what the fear would be like and what life would be presented to me as if I had no vision. But the problem with that is I know deep in the core of my belly, I know that at any moment, if I want to see, I can open my eyes. Right? Yeah. I can just open them up, and now I cannot fully ever understand exactly what that would be like. Right? And I think that kind of presents as a lot of times when we do get to that place where we're not able to sufficiently recall how bad it was. It's almost in the same realm, right? Like I almost, it's not that I'm refusing, but I just can't get there. Right?
I find the way that I maintain that level of clarity of where I come from and what that looks like and what I can return to is through other people. Mm. So, working in the field is really helpful because I'm continuously bombarded by watching people who are not doing the proper amount of work, or I can see them on their way out. But even in, I'm part of, a self-help group as well. And getting to like sponsor people or be just connected to others really helps with that. Cause the disease of addiction, like one of the greatest enemies is isolation, because isolation makes the disease virtually undetectable. And when I'm alone, I don't have a mirror to reflect back to me those things. When I'm around other people and I'm watching, not the people who are doing really well.
Right.
People who are doing really well are almost dangerous to me at times.
Right.
Same way, like people who drink excessively or use excessively are dangerous, are not dangerous to me. People who drink or use a little bit are dangerous to me.
Right.
Because it makes me believe that I'm capable of doing that.
Right.
I'm not that person. Other people might be.
Yeah.
I'm what we call a pickle.
I'm with you, buddy.
I'm a pickle.
Yeah.
Some people might be a cucumber still. But I'm already in the juice. There's no going back for me. I might want to be a cucumber as much as I can, but I'm never going back.
Toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, getting to watch the people that are brand new, mm-hmm. the people that are struggling, who can't see the forest for the trees, that are, coming out of desperation, degradation, dereliction. Those are the people that really reflect it back to me and remind me of where I come from. And if I stop helping those people, I'll forget who I am and I'll forget what it is. And eventually I'll probably be one of those people coming in and having some old timer have to help me.
I love that, man. And, originally I was going to ask you if you'd always had an interest in helping others, but I think you kind of explained it away there. But on that same note, right? Now you're mentioning helping, what's your approach professionally? Helping individuals with like co-occurring mental health and addiction issues. What is your role in the community?
So, I think the world has partitioned addiction and mental health as separate things.
Okay.
But addiction is a mental health disorder.
You
so the reason we always list them kind of separately, my work does, I know you guys do.
We do, yeah.
Is because a lot of people can't see that it is one. Like they're synonymous to each other.
They really are, yeah.
And I don't think I've ever had a client come in that didn't have comorbidity or co-occurring disorders. I think all of them came in and have, some sort of underlying mental health that has exacerbated their addiction, or their addiction has exacerbated their mental health. Now, the longer people stay abstinent, the easier it is to kind of weed that out. So, at the beginning, the way I usually deal with it when people are coming in is we send them off to go see our doctor.
Okay.
And the doctor that we use is this guy, Jake Bobrowski. He's been around for, I don't know, he's like 80. He's the head of psych for Ryerson. He's like fantastic. And he's basically dedicated his life to helping people with addiction. And he doesn't look at their file. This is the really important thing. He doesn't look at their files. And he brings them into their office. Instead of asking them about all their medical conditions and stuff, he asks them about their childhood. He asks them about their life and why they used. Do they know why they used? What they used? Was that sequenced with something that was like a trauma, or was that sequenced with, did they have anything that maybe reflected something that was an undiagnosed mental health disorder? And he starts at ground zero. And he does like these 2.5-hour sessions. They're ridiculously long, but no other doctors are doing that. I watch these other doctors and they give you like 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And they read your file and they go, it says you're bipolar, so here's some meds. Instead of looking at it through a clear, brand new lens, and then seeing if those things are actually accurate. And the majority of the people I find that when they first become abstinent, they have a laundry list of mental health disorders, and because addiction mirrors a lot of them. Addiction, active use mirrors bipolar or borderline personality disorder. It mirrors depression. When I first got clean, I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, ADD, and bipolar. I am 100% ADD still. So that never went away. I just learned to hone it in. But the other two fell off because they were directly correlated to my addiction, the diagnoses, because it mimicked it. So, with a lot of when clients come in, I try not to make too many assumptions on what is and what isn't and the effects on each other. And we just try to get them to a place of stabilization. And once we get them to a place of emotional stabilization, we can do a reassessment and determine if those are real and those need to be addressed, or if those were mimicked by the addiction. If that makes sense to you.
It makes absolute perfect sense to me. And I can identify with a few things that you shared there. And based on that same experience, what role does additional community supports play in the recovery process once we get to that stage?
Oh man. So we talked about this regularly. So the social determinants of health, all the things that people need in their life to be happy, joyous, and free, are some of the really basic things, not the big flighty things that we want to give people, like a spiritual transformation, but just the basics, housing, like a safe place to live, food, shelter, water, base financing. And so for us, we have this integrated network of community supports that we deal with, Simcoe Treatment Center being one of them. We send clients back and forth and work with each other actively. A lot of other agencies, treatment agencies we work with, housing programs, but it's getting more and more difficult because the scope of the mass magnitude of addiction in Ontario right now is so big, and the help is so small. From like a government standpoint, from a financial standpoint, and a lot of the money, I'm not slighting harm reduction agencies. It's definitely a really needed thing, but a lot of the money has gone into triage. So helping, maintain addiction in a safe way, the safer way. I'll say not safe, safer way.
Fair.
Instead of setting up a long-term continuum of care. The long-term continuum of care is to take somebody who says they identify, I need help, like you said, those magic words, I need help, and then getting them to a withdrawal management center, transferring them into a treatment center, getting them into post-residential agencies, getting them into long-term housing, and sustaining their life. But that system is broken, and every agency it seems to be autonomous and they're not working together. And because of that, I have a hard time navigating it. I've been doing this for 13 years. I have a hard time navigating the system. I can't imagine somebody with 30 days in a fog, not ever knowing how to like, pick up the phone and make those calls, or who to call, or who provides what, and being able to manage that, navigate that system. So, I mean, we really rely on a lot of agencies to pick up on the pieces that we can't do, and we focus on something really specific. When I started at Alpha, we took people in that were homeless. We took people in that were coming out of treatment, from detoxes, all over the place.
Sure.
And we refined that down to being post-residential. So somebody goes to Simcoe Treatment Center, and then they would, come to Alpha House for 3 to 4 months doing stabilization, post-residential, and then we would get them into housing. That was our shtick. And having something really specific allows us to have a greater outcome. When we try to be all things to everybody, it all falls apart. So if somebody has adult survivor of childhood sexual abuse, we'll send them to the Gatehouse. They're a wonderful program. They'll help us. We'll send people to Broadview Homes or to Salvation Army for, long-term housing programs. But without that network and really agencies working together, people don't stand a chance, because they're just getting spin dried and then kicked and then sent back to the same place that they came from.
And I mean, you touched on so many important pieces, and you nailed on something else. Like, if we don't have those supports, first of all, like the community partnership aspect, to be able to openly communicate with other agencies, take Circle Care out of the mix. We're talking about actual relationships where our objective is to in and out daily, boots on the ground, try and help that individual meet those recovery goals, which ultimately is life, living, right? Yeah. And I remember early on when I got into this field, really early on, I remember you actually said something that was a little bit of a game changer for me, because I was frustrated with some of the things I was seeing. I had struggled with harm reduction modeling. I had struggled with my own biases that were sort of getting in the way of preventing me preventing me from moving forward. And I remember you said something, and I don't know if you recall saying this, but you said to me, Jay, when I got into this field in the beginning, I really wanted to save the world. Mm-hmm. But in a short period of time, I realized I couldn't, and that my job then, in fact, became helping keep the individual alive long enough for them to find recovery. Yeah. And I found that was like an absolute bomb of information for me, because it didn't pull the bricks out of the wall, right? It blew up the wall and it allowed me to start walking through and becoming more open-minded on some of the things that were holding me back professionally. And then I was thinking, as you were sharing about, if we don't have these supports in place, like, I'm sure you can identify with this, but I know that I was well on my way in recovery, and I didn't access the additional resources that were available to me, and I found myself on this loop of disaster, but I found some sort of contented recovery, and as a result, I got my first vehicle. And I was driving to one of the centers that I was working at, and I was driving home one day, and I remember, and it was the first time I'd driven, Jordan, in 22 years, and it was my very first car. Like, I've never owned a car, at least legally, and it was my first car, and I found myself, I'm driving along, and I hear this thunk, this little thunk sound on my car. And I remember sort of like turning the volume down on the radio and shuffling the steering wheel and pressing the gas and hitting the brake. And I'm trying to mirror and mimic that sound to see what the sound was. And it never came. And I get home, and you see, up until then, I remember a neighbor of mine, he had bought a brand new car as well. Right around the same time, he had a shiny red Kia. And I remember like we would sort of have the head nods, you know, when we're in like the secret new car club, and he was about 2 doors down from me, and we'd see each other and we'd nod our heads, and I'd see him all the time in this car, and he'd see me, and we would just have our little head nods, and so I come home from work that day after the sound. I go inside and make a coffee, and I'm sitting up on the stoop and I'm looking at my car, and I'm wondering what that sound was. And right when I'm doing that, around the corner comes this guy with the new red Kia. And he pulls into his driveway, and I'm looking at his car. He must have just come out of the car wash, Jordan, because that car was shiny. And I'm kind of looking at my car, and I'm thinking, yeah, my car is kind of dirty. And I'm looking at his tires, and I'm like, man, those are some sexy tires, man. They look like, what, 15 inches? And I look over at my tires, and I'm like, I don't know, they kind of boring. And then I'm looking at like the tail light or the headlamps, and I'm like, I like the lamps on the Kia. And I start looking at the lamps on my car, and I slowly started to pick apart all the things that I don't like about my car and all the things I love about his car. And let's keep in mind, 3 days earlier, I'm driving down a road in Whitby, listening to Joni Mitchell, and I'm bawling my eyes out with gratitude for having this vehicle. And in a very short period of time, I'm seeking something else. You know, and I didn't have any understanding of my behavior outside of alcohol and drugs, you know, and I feel like a lot of these external supports that are out there would allow me more time to learn from experiences like that instead of having to go through them right necessarily. I could be presented with learning opportunities, you know. Does that sound familiar?
Sounds gratitude is 100% fleeting all the time. And
so fleeting.
I have a 2023 Sorrento. And it was, and I got it about 4 months ago, and I was really excited when I got it because it was 2022 still, and I was so impressed with myself that I have this 2023 in 2022, and now it's 2023, and I'm like, oh, it's just this year now. But it happens to all of us, and I think, you know, I mean, that's a big piece in recovery, is that there's a really great book called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And it's about a man that had, you know, he went through that process, and he had, you know, a really great job. And then, you know, and he was like working on Wall Street, and then he got like a Porsche, and that, and eventually that didn't become enough. And he got married to this really beautiful woman. And then a couple of years later, she was a little too old for him, and he divorced her and got a new girlfriend. And then eventually got his Ferrari, and he worked his way to this ladder of success that has no top.
Right.
And then eventually when he got there, he realized how hollow his life was, and he sold everything he had, gave all the money away, and became a monk. And he talks about how he's never been more contented in his life. And it's not about having money or not having money. Like, having stuff is nice. I have stuff. It's nice, right, to have stuff. Mm-hmm. But without that spiritual contentment that goes with it, you know, you'll never be satisfied. And I remember being in treatment, and this psychologist that was there, he used to really grill me, and he's just said, he would always say to me, Jordan, when are you going to be happy? And I always had these ideas, like, when I get a house, I'll be happy. When I get married, I'll be happy. When I have kids, I'll be happy. When I have the job I want, I'll be happy. But recovery doesn't work that way. It's about it's learning to be contented exactly where I am right now, and learning, because we're always waiting for something, right? And giving people that time, like you said, in that continuum where they are stable long enough, and they have help long enough, and counselors and people to reflect stuff back to them, that gives them that safe place, so they don't get caught up in that fleeting gratitude moment, right? You know, I mean, meetings are really great for that, because you always have people who talk about that. And when you see people lacking that are new coming in, it reminds you of the great gift you have. But once you separate from all of that, and you try to do things on your own, you get stuck in those moments.
Yeah.
You know, because you don't see the depravity. I went to Haiti a few years ago to go build an orphanage.
I remember that.
And I mean, there was an attempt on the president's life when I was there. They evacuated the country. They were like setting, like roads were being set on fire, like piles of tires. You couldn't get anywhere. It was mayhem, and really scary, like really scary. And I've been to a lot of poor places, but that trip reset something in me. I have a picture of this little girl in my living room, and she's got a little like a lop eye. And my wife, she's always like, it's a weird picture. And so people always ask me, they're like, what is that? Right. But this girl, I remember her when I was there, we made lasagna. These kids had never had lasagna. They eat like every 3-4 days. And I spent a whole bunch of time and I prepped this big lasagna. And when we brought it there, we cut up the pieces and we handed them out. And all these kids are just gorging on it because they're starving. This orphanage doesn't have money. It's not like they're providing them care. It's just a roof, right? And this little girl, she takes a bite of it, and then she lifts up her dress. She's like 4 or 5, and then she hides it in her underwear, right? Hides the rest of the lasagna in her underwear. And that I couldn't let go of that moment, right? Like that is desperation. Like she's saving that because these other kids are going to take it from her later if she doesn't hide it. And like sitting in that moment, remembering that moment, no matter what I get in life and where I get and how it looks, I remember that that's a place where other people are, and that's a place I can go.
Right.
And that allows me to stay in gratitude. But I only got to that place because I was able to sustain long enough in recovery to get to that place.
To learn it, to be teachable and learn it.
Yeah.
I remember hearing a line when I had some problems with my feet. I remember hearing a line, I used to complain about my shoes till I met a man with no feet. And shortly after, I'm at the GO station and I see a fella, with prosthetics. And I remember thinking to myself in that moment, I'm like, oh yeah. So these opportunities are now presented to me that thrust me back into a place where I can remember to be grateful. Absolutely. And the more I do that, the more they present themselves because there's more opportunities to remember this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I back to the Alpha House. I mean, what first of all, what's Alpha House's? What makes it so special, brother?
So,
because I have my own thoughts, but I want to hear what you think.
So we're the only place I know that does what we do. I wish the government would fund lots of different places that do it, but we're post-residential aftercare. So our role is essentially taking people directly out of treatment that are still homeless and bridging them. So we'll take them and keep them at our center for about 3-4 months and get them into long-term sustainable housing. And during that time, we do educational, vocational training, resume writing, different things, along with a partner agency called Oasis. We'll also do groups on, relapse prevention, alumni engagement. We have clinical case managers on site that meet with them every week. We have an addictions doctor that they come and see. And, the piece that it fills is this niche that's drastically needed. And you can think of Ontario like a big funnel, and there's all of these treatment agencies that are doing really magnificent work. Mm-hmm. And they're constantly seeking to, get people into a place, but there's no place to send them. So, I mean, if somebody has a home and all that kind of stuff, that's great. But a lot of addicts have lost their homes. They've lost or the right to go to their homes because of damages that they've done to their family. So we get these people that are going to be destitute, and we bring them in directly from treatment while they're on point, right?
Yeah,
they're doing the things they need to do. They're on fire. They want it. They're willing, which is, I mean, you have to capitalize on that moment, because that moment is exceptionally rare. It takes everything in the planet to line up. It's like an eclipse,
right?
And you need divine intervention. You need willingness. You need courage. You need people who are willing to help. You need space. Yeah, you need all these things to line up, and you get this person in this perfect eclipse when they're willing and ready, and then you tell them, "We got no place for you to go. You're going to go to a shelter. You're going to go back to the street." And, there's this old adage of, I can take a tree in a diseased forest and I remove that tree and I plant it in some fresh soil and I filter it out with water and I bring that tree back alive and it comes back and it's blossoming and it's beautiful and it's green. If I take that tree after all that work and I pluck it back out and I put it back into that same diseased forest of which it came, it's going to die.
Yeah.
So our job, the treatment centers do this amazing work, like Simcoe, you guys do amazing work here. And then you take these people and you plant them in a fresh pot and you get them all back to life. And we take them from there and we put them into a bigger pot. And then we allow them some abilities to be autonomous and then keep them, putting them into different pots and different pots and different pots until they're able to go and we find a safe place for them to land, a safe forest for them to go to. That's essentially our role. I mean, it's a weird one because people call us all the time and they say, "What are you guys treatment?" We say no. They're like, "Are you a transition house?" I go, "No." And they're like, "Well, what are you?" I'm like, "We're post-residential aftercare." We found that niche because it was so needed.
Right.
And I wish I could duplicate it over and over and over, but unfortunately, the funding just isn't there with the government.
You guys
yet.
do such incredible work, and I'm really fortunate to know a lot of your staff. They're fantastic, and it's remarkable. What about what are the challenges though on the inside of Alpha House, like with clients, like and how do you deal with them, like problematic type stuff, like
Okay, so and I guess that depends on language, on what we would consider problematic.
That's a good point.
Kevin Amison,
yes,
is
one of my
mentors. Wonderful man, one of my mentors. Started me off in this field.
Same.
Really, really beautiful soul, and he. When I used to work at the Brooklyn House treatment center, and Kevin was my boss, and we have these people that would be in their clients and they would be, they'd be being like really abrasive, or I'm not going to group, or I don't want to do my chore, or all sorts of no's and resistance. And, I would get stuck in that mindset, like, this guy's a problem and he's not going to do what we need to do. And I would go to Kevin, and when I would go to Kevin, he'd always say, "What's under the behavior?" And it never left my mind. What's under the behavior? And at first I was like, "What do you mean? He's being a jerk. Like, we shouldn't have to put up with this." He goes, "What's under the behavior?" And it softens me, because I look at somebody who says, "I don't want to do this or that." It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not willing. What it means is, sometimes when I look underneath, is that they're scared.
Right.
That they feel like they're incapable. What's the point of doing this? Because I'm going to go out anyways. Like, they've told themselves this story over and over that they can't do this, that it's not going to work, that they're terminally unique from the rest of the people that are in that center. So they're responding to that in they're acting out, sometimes trying to sabotage themselves to get tossed out of a place, because they don't want to be the one to pull the pin. So with those guys, usually we got to get creative, and every person's an individual. Some of them I push really hard to see if they'll break. Other people I have to use really kid gloves and love them, and because some people have never. I've had people in that you realize really quickly, no one has ever told them that they're worth it. No one has ever told them that they're capable. No one has ever taken a minute to give them a hug and just show them like an iota of love. They come from these horrible homes, or they're adult survivors of child sexual abuse.
Right.
And sometimes that's all it takes to change somebody's trajectory. It's just letting them know that we have faith in them and we love them, even if they don't love themselves. And then others, there's a few that are, it's not what they want. And there used to be an adage in addictions treatment saying no wrong door. I'm not a believer in it. I believe there are wrong doors. I believe sometimes people get misreferred because whoever was working with them didn't take the time to look into the agency that they're sending them to find out if the program actually was what they want. I have guys that come to us sometimes and they'll be like, "Well, I just wanted housing." Like, well, we're not housing, so I'm not going to ask them to leave. We're going to work with them to get them into housing. But, they weren't prepared for the level of programming we have. That's not what they were looking for. So, I have to treat everybody individually and then, try to figure out what archetype they are. I figure there's like maybe 12 archetypes of clients in the world. There's different personalities and different stories, but there's about 12 different types of clients. And once I figure out where they kind of fall in that, I have to create with my team a plan, because they're not going to do it. Client's not going to do it. They don't know how to do it. So we create a plan of action. I mean, me and you have worked on those together with people.
We have.
Trying to lovingly corral them in the right direction.
Lovingly corral. Perfect.
Yeah, it's like herding cats at times. Trying to get a cat in a bath, but because they don't know how to do it, and they're going to resist things the same way I resist things. Contempt prior to investigation is fatal.
I'm not eating broccoli.
Yeah, absolutely. I hated broccoli my entire life. I'll tell you this: I never ate broccoli my entire life. I looked at it and I said, I know I don't like it.
Same, yeah.
And then when I hit about 35, my wife said, you never tried this stuff? And I'm like, no, it looks gross. Yeah. And then I dipped some in ranch, a cold piece, and I ate it. It's one of my favorite things now.
I believe it.
I was like, I'm an idiot. what am I doing? I wasted all this time. I could have been eating this broccoli.
Prior to investigation.
Contempt prior to investigation. Yeah. So, it's our job to reflect things back to those people when they are problematic or resistant, or and try to find out, rolling with the resistance, trying to find out what's underneath, rather than looking at the actions, because the actions are sometimes abrasive, and we get transference as counselors, and I want to respond. Sometimes I want to respond really negatively, and I got to bury that down and put on the counselor face, and remember that I signed up to help these people change their lives. And they're like children. They have the mind of a child, a lot of them, and that's going to change. But I have to keep that in the back of my mind. What's under the behavior, not what is the behavior. If that makes sense.
That is absolutely such integral and amazing information. And I just wanted to honestly just take this opportunity to thank you again. So this is we have Jordan Anderson, the executive director of Alpha House Toronto. Feel free to I think we're going to put some your website and your information on below, whether we're on our Spotify or our YouTube channel. But honestly, Jordan, I can't thank you enough, brother, for coming in.
It's my pleasure.
You're an absolute pillar in the recovery community. You're one of the most incredibly enlightened and exceptional professionals that I've ever seen in this field. Most people that I know in the profession throughout the province of Ontario hold you to the highest standards because of the incredible work you do, the incredible selfless way you carry yourself. It's absolutely astonishing, and so we're really grateful that you took the time to come out to our center here today, and on behalf of everyone at Simcoe Addiction and Mental Health, thank you for that.
Thanks.
And, if you have any last words that you wanted to share.
If you're new and you're listening to this, get your butt in a chair. The miracle will happen.
Amen to that. Brother, thank you very much. And we'll continue to see you on the path.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay.